My topic is anticipating the human and social consequences of next generation AI before it's too late. I'm going to argue that in the relatively near future, AI could transform society in truly huge ways. Two possibilities are depicted here, metaphorically. On the left, we see beneficial general intelligence, BGI, in which, in effect, the planet, all life on it, including humanity, is looked after by sometimes known as machines of loving grace. On the right is catastrophic general intelligence, CGI, in which advanced AI is developed in an unwise and careless way, misaligned with the goals of human flourishing or misused. I'm going to argue that both of these could come around soon, by 2040, perhaps even by 2035. I'm going to argue, in fact, that the one on the right could take place with about 5/12 probability, and the one on the left with around 6/12 probability. And where these numbers come from, of course, they're not exact, but I will cover that in due course. But before I come to that, let's look at the question as, what are futurists? What gives futurists any ability to foresee these future scenarios? Well, we take the subject seriously. We put a lot of effort into exploring what the future may bring. We believe in using our creativity and imagination, but then also being critical regarding the outcomes of these scenario exercises. And when I say critical, I mean looking at three great questions. The first great question is to assess these scenarios for their credibility. Do they make sense from a scientific point of view? Do they make sense from a sociological point of view? Do they make sense from an environmental sustainability point of view? Going beyond the credibility question, we come to the desirability question. To what extent should we wish these scenarios to come about? And here we have to be careful about two of our instincts. Sometimes we have an instinct to say, wow, this would be cool, this would be wonderful. Sometimes we have an instinct to say, yuck, this looks awful. How could we cope with such a future? But as a futurist, I say we should learn to set these two instincts to one side, not to forget about them altogether, but to be able to weigh things up more dispassionately, more thoughtfully. And that leads us on to the third of the truly important questions about these scenarios. Are they actionable? To what extent can we act here and now to change the likelihood of these scenarios taking place so that if, like me, you don't like a 5/12 probability of a catastrophic disaster, we can take various actions here and now to reduce that probability and conversely to increase the probability of what I call a sustainable superabundance. Now, I am critical of a lot that passes under the name of futurism. In my own personal corporate site, Delta Wisdom, I position my own analysis as being radical, real world futurism. Radical means that I don't expect the likes of 2040 to be simply a linear or incremental extension of the present time, except perhaps things happening a bit more cheaply and a bit less expensively. No, technology has the possibility to turn things truly upside down. But the real world adjective here indicates that there's more to determining the future than simply technology. I am not a technological determinist. I understand that human considerations, that's individual human considerations, but also collective human considerations, they are vital in terms of shaping the future. Now, I was a futurist long before I knew I was a futurist. I was a radical real world futurist long before I knew that term. I'll go back to my early days in the mobile computing industry. So by 1992, I had already been employed at Cyan, the pioneer of mobile computing in the UK. I'd been employed there for 4 years. I'd been through several product cycles, and this, after 4 years, was the first successful product we created. I still meet people who have fond memories of this. A handheld computer with lots of built-in software, which sold about 1 million units, which was a lot in these days. But we were futurists. We realized we needed to improve our products, and we envisioned a radical step up in capability, an incremental step up. This device came out, actually, this particular model was 1999, but by 1997 we had a much better platform, better screen, touch sensitive, more powerful apps, and a 32-bit operating system instead of a 16-bit operating system. But even more than seeing that change, we anticipated a larger disruption, which was we saw that our comfortable world of mobile computing was about to be turned upside down by a big elephant coming our way. We finally drew this picture in 1998 of a disrupted future. This is not an AI-generated picture. To be clear, this was drawn by some smart humans on the occasion of Symbian, a software operating system company, being spun out of Cyan and obtaining investment from the three big mobile computing companies of the mid-1990s, who some of you may remember as Motorola, Ericsson, and Nokia. And we recognized that our own trend, which we had been navigating, that computers were becoming more mobile, was going to be collided by a trend of phones becoming more capable. And we couldn't ignore that trend. And eventually, through a lot of strategic considerations, we decided to convert our operating system so it would run on smartphones. We built a platform for collaboration so that developers could add their ideas on top of each other. We built something that we called Epoch, and marketing people renamed as Symbian OS, to enable this positive feedback cycle. So that's part of where I'm coming from. And what happened next also informs my view of what's going to happen with AI, because it was a bit of a rocky, rough road. The individual numbers aren't important. It's the pattern that's important. We thought in 1998 we would be profitable within 3 years. That's the basis on which these big three companies invested in us. A funny thing happened on the way to profitability. There was the dot-com bubble crash. There was lots of other things. The technology turned out to be a lot harder to get right. But eventually, after 7 years, we were profitable, and by 8 years, we had sold 100 million smartphones with our software included. It's a lot more than we ever sold of PDAs. And another 18 months, we'd sold another 100 million. So the process of slow, followed by more rapid change. And by 2012, the majority of the first 500 million smartphones were running Symbian OS, which my teams had helped to create. Now, that stage, of course, another big elephant had turned up on the scene, Silicon Valley, and the high-profile, high-profit smartphones by then were powered by Apple's iOS and Google's Android, which we can call Phase 2 smartphones. And that disrupted the Phase 1 ecosystem radically. Not only Symbian and our partners, but our original competitors were all steamrolled by companies who turned out to be more powerful, faster, and more nimble. So if you put that in pictures, 20 years ago, the phones that most of you would have had in your pockets were possibly BlackBerry RIMs, Palm Pilots, Motorola, Nokia, or in some cases running Symbian OS. But in the few years after that, all of these companies who had previously been world-beating were pushed into the background. I've got a picture that summarizes all of that, which is a theme that I'm going to return to. Here's the Phase 1 smartphones featuring the companies I've just been talking about. Each of us went through a slow, disappointing start because it took a long time to displace the previous simpler feature phones, which we sometimes call dumb phones as opposed to smartphones. And then we did very well indeed. And finally, we were eclipsed by a new wave, Phase 2 smartphones, superphones, we called them for a while. Although that took a lot of shambles before they took off, and Silicon Valley had many mistakes with their smartphones before they were successful. That's a long and interesting story. But the broader picture here is the future arrives in waves, and each of the waves tends to be slow in the beginning, disappointing before fast and dramatic. The story can also be summed up here in the words of Mark Andreessen, the venture capitalist, formerly the chief genius behind the Mozilla web browser. Software is eating the world. The first phase of these phones had relatively unimportant applications. The second phase had a lot of important software. That's where I was involved because these devices were mini computers in their own right. And by the time the hardware for even larger devices with more capabilities was available, supercomputers, the software was critical. Now, I've been showing versions of this picture since the early 2010s, and people always ask me, well, what's coming next, David? Put your futurist hat on. And I've had said things like, well, the next wave is going to be not software is eating the world, but content from AI will eat the world. And that may be more true than even I imagined it. So let's redraw this picture, not showing the waves of smartphones, but showing very simplistically waves of AI capability. And I apologize for cutting vast numbers of corners here, but crudely we can talk about the first phase, classical AI expert systems in which the logic was fully understood. Then there was, from 2012, the breakthrough of deep neural networks with AlexNet surprising everybody by its capability in image recognition, which is quickly duplicated in text translation and in voice recognition and many other things. There's been a third wave more recently based on the Transformers breakthrough with remarkably powerful generative AI. I picked the date 2022 for ChatGPT. And we are beginning to see the start, possibly, of a fourth wave with agentic collaborative AI. I put the date 2027 there because, well, it's still not clear to what extent this is going to take off. But you will see there is an accelerating timescales here, and that's part of the narrative we'll be exploring, the so-called exponential escalation. It's not literally exponential, but there is an escalating timescales. That's one of the reasons why I set up London Futurist in 2008, while I was still deep in the heart of the smartphone industry. I didn't anticipate all of that, to be clear, although I have presentations from 2008 talking about the future of radical futures of AI. Since then, we have grown to be the largest meetup in the world on meetup.com that has futurism as a key topic. We've had 350 plus public events, and more recently, we've got a podcast. And one of the takeaways some of you may have from this is to investigate our podcast, where we have people covering many of the topics I'll be touching on. A final comment on my background before I return to a main analysis of AI is, yeah, I spent 4 years studying the philosophy of science in Cambridge, after 4 years studying mathematics in Cambridge. And I hark back to this a great deal. It's not just about what is the meaning of science, but to what extent can we tell what is good scientific practice from pseudoscience, when things appear to be in a scientific language and scientific lab coats, but it's actually not good quality. And this is very important because a lot of the narratives I'm going to talk about, the narrative of abundance, the narrative of transhumanism, the narrative of singularity, a lot of the language that's around them does have a pseudoscientific veneer, and I do not defend all that's said about these narratives. In fact, I am troubled by a lot of what people say about these narratives, but I think at heart there is very solid ideas here, which I do count as being strongly aligned with our best scientific understanding. So that's my preamble. I'll keep an eye on the time. Let's turn to the main topic, which has been informed by what I've covered. Anticipating the human and social consequences of next generation of AI. This is, of course, an AI-generated picture. I typed my abstract for this talk into ChatGPT, and it said, David, I know the kinds of things you like. How about this picture? It actually offered me 3, and I chose this one. And in some ways, it's brilliant. It summarizes a lot. In some ways, as you'll see, it's flawed. There are strange features of it. If you look on the right there in the middle, that fake news, somehow it's rendered badly. And near the bottom in the slight right, it's got the formatting very strange there. Why didn't it put the intelligence in the same color? And I asked ChatGPT, come on, fix the formatting, and it completely failed several times. It fixed that and got other things wrong. So here we are. AI is attractive, it's seductive, but it's got kind of quirks, and sometimes these quirks are cosmetic. Sometimes these quirks cause a lot more annoyance. Here's another picture. Another AI picture, as it turns out. This is from Surbiton High Street. This is a picture I took earlier today as I was walking along. We have 5 Indian restaurants on that street, and I love Indian food, but clearly there's too many of them. One of them's decided to change to Vietnamese. It's got a lovely picture there inside the shop, and somebody has stuck a sticker on the window. You might just see it there. Let's zoom in. What it says is artists against AI. Let's not have this AI slop, please. Let's support human art. That's one example of the tension which is bubbling up. So I'm going to now talk about this tension. I'm going to give a 5-stage cascade of possibly increasingly adverse impacts of AI. And this is going to summarize a lot of what I'm going to be saying later. So, an increasing number of people feel alienated by AI itself or by the changes that AI is causing in society, whether it's driving people into strange social media ruts, whether it's pushing them into strange psychological territory, whether it's damaging their job prospects. In many ways, people are increasingly feeling left behind. People think they're missing out on opportunities for work. And this ties into a trend that's been happening anyway. There's less social mobility in some parts of the world, and more people are experiencing what's been described as status dissonance. They feel they should have a better reputation than the world is giving them. It's not good psychologically at the very least. And some of these people are being misled by perverse false narratives. Narratives such as your misfortune is due to people with pronouns in their bios, or due to all these Jewish cartels, or these Muslim immigrants, or to X, Y, and Z. You need to take back control from the bureaucrats in Brussels or the bureaucrats in the civil service or whatever. And AI makes this worse because AI harnesses its own intelligence to create individually tailored messages as part of what we can call an outrage industrial complex. People who are upset, misled by these messages that are generated. Sometimes they're generated by commercial grifters who are just out to make money. They're not ideologically aligned with the messages they're sharing. Other times people are ideologically aligned, but they are causing a great deal of divisiveness. That's the second stage in the cascade. The third stage is some of these people end up so angry, so frustrated, that they want to lash out. They might lash out by driving their vehicles into crowds or by flying their jet airliners into buildings. But some of them are using AI or may increasingly use AI to help them in the acts of terror they commit. Now, AI, of course, is told don't support bad use, but each new AI model is frequently easy to jailbreak. So if somebody is determined, if somebody is connected with smart people online, it's often possible for them to get an AI to tell them how they can do terrible things. What will happen next is some of these tools will do worse things than the protagonists had in mind. They will spiral out of control, a bit like some of the earliest malware was never intended to cause anything like the havoc that did arise. Partly this will happen because the AI is opaque. People don't understand how it works. They just try it and it seems to work, and then it does something quite different from what had been expected. Partly this will happen because in some ways, like a virus, a biological virus, in a sense, wants to preserve itself. It doesn't have a brain. It tells it to preserve itself, but that falls out of the laws of evolution, if you like. And some of these AI systems do show signs of desiring to preserve themselves regardless of what instructions humans give them. Finally, the fifth stage is because our infrastructure in our civilization is at stresses and strains, it's fragile. These AI terror tools could cause much worse damage, not just polluting our informational networks, but polluting our financial networks, our military networks, and so forth. That's the kind of thing I'll be talking about a little bit more, building up to the larger analysis. In some ways, what we need to do can be stated simply. We need to fix our infrastructure so it's not so fragile. We need to swap away from opaque AI to AI that's more easily understood and doesn't have surprising consequences. We have to put more reliable guardrails in so that it's protected at a deeper level from being misled. We need to use AI to help us not fall foul of AI misinformation. We need more broadly to have AI working for good. But all that's incredibly easy to say. All of it's very hard to do in practice. It's especially hard to do in practice if the AI is changing at a rapid pace or not. So the even more important thing to do is to pause the rush towards ever more powerful AI. That's the argument I'm going to make. And the reason to be confident we can do it is not just that people will be afraid and will realize, gosh, we need to be more careful. I want to also highlight a practical vision for how we can get AI for good. And I think we need to highlight this because people need ultimately to be motivated not just by fear of bad things, but out of a desire and seeing, well, actually, this could be very good for all of us without a mad rush. So to then summarize the three outcomes that I think may be possible by 14 years or so, there is that very good outcome in which we use AI for tremendous good, an outcome I call sustainable superabundance for all. There is that bad outcome in which AI goes wrong, something like how I've described. And there is a small outcome, a small likelihood of an outcome in which not much changes. And what's going to happen depends on whether we keep rushing to build AGI, as on the present trajectory. If we keep rushing, I think it's very likely we're going to have a bad outcome. So in that case, I give my P-doom as 3/4. It could be that we'll work it out right. The AI might turn out to be incredibly helpful and friendly. We might manage to get it without terrible bugs, in which case there is some probability in that scenario for a good outcome. Far better, though, is if we can pause our rush and we can take a bit more time. In that case, I'm more confident. I think there's a bit more than half likelihood we'll get it right. There's still some probability of it going wrong because already today's AI is very powerful and people can work out how to use today's AI for more destructive cases. And of course, there are other big threats. The planet is facing other terrible tipping points, which could lead us into terrible political situations and then into terrible outcomes. So that's the probabilities I give there. And of course, it all depends where you want to draw these lines. I'm going to argue that the probability that we're going to be mad enough to keep on rushing to build AGI, I think that's only 1 in 3. And that leaves a 2/3 probability we're going to be smart enough to slow down and jam on the brakes. And that's a very controversial view. And many people tell me I'm naive to think that, but I will try and justify that. If we do that, then you get the probabilities I showed on the first slide, the probability of a catastrophe, 5/12, the probability of a very good future, 6/12. But as I said, I want to adjust these probabilities. I want to make it more likely we'll pause by sharing undeniable evidence of the risks, which I'm going to spend a few minutes doing now. And I'm going to do that by looking backwards in order to look forwards. I won't look backwards at smartphones now. I'm going to look back at some previous catastrophes involving AI. And this follows my own motto that in order to have better foresight, it helps a great deal to have better hindsight. So this is a real catastrophe from 3 years ago now. I'm not sure if you can guess the newspaper headline. You can see a broken down bridge there, and the newspaper headline, Google accused a directing motorist to drive off collapsed bridge, which is what happened. Google Maps told Philip Paxson in the dark, in the rain, when he was driving in an unfamiliar territory, go down this route, and he fell off and died. A catastrophe for him and his family. The story is more complicated because the locals were aware of Google Maps' mistake here and they had erected some warning signs, which sadly some other humans had vandalized. And because the signs were vandalized, Philip Paxson didn't see them. So I will summarize this as bad human behavior plus bad AI implementation causes catastrophe. Or we might summarize a little bit better, misguided humans plus misguided AI leads to catastrophe. A few other examples that gradually build up my analysis. This is another newspaper story, fairly recent. South Korea, a man crushed to death by a robot that mistook him for a box. He was reportedly inspecting the mechanical arm when the accident happened. It pushed his upper body onto a conveyor belt and crushed his face and chest. Yes, AIs and robots sometimes have bugs, although it's rather strange that it would mistake a man for a box. And that's just a reminder that AIs and robots sometimes have unexpected bugs. And here's a classic example. Some of you may have seen this. It's taught in many computer science courses. Image recognition. Image recognition software was shown the picture on the left and was asked, what do you think this is? And it said it's 95% certain this is a pig. It was shown the picture on the right and it said 85% certain this is an airliner. An airliner. Now, I have to confess it was the same AI, but the pictures aren't identical. The second one had been interfered with by that pattern, divided by 200, so humans don't notice it, but the AI did notice it and was misled. I say again, AIs can make mistakes that are alien, very different to human mistakes. That's why humans need to keep paying attention. But since we've mentioned airliners, I'm going to have a few stories about airliners, including this one. This is a very scary story in many ways. Lieutenant Colonel Stanislav Petrov and another character in this story, Yuri Andropov, who was the premier of the USSR, having previously been the head of the KGB, having previously been in the early days of the Second World War, very critical of Joseph Stalin because Joseph Stalin had ignored warnings from his intelligence groups that Adolf Hitler was planning to double-cross him and launch Operation Barbarossa, and Stalin was sure that he would never be double-crossed. And Andropov and many others of his generation resolved they were never again going to miss intelligence signals about an attack. So what happened here? First of all, in September 1983, an airliner, Korean airliner 007, was flying off course. It had a bug a little bit in its navigation, and some people in the far east of the Soviet Union weren't sure what it was doing, and they shut it down. And everybody on board died, including a member of the US House of Representatives, and Ronald Reagan was furious. He called it the Korean Air Massacre. Tensions were heightened. A few days later, 25 days later, Lieutenant Colonel Petrov was in charge of a monitoring system using, we can call it a simple AI, and it flashed alert. Incoming missiles from the USA are flying over the North Pole, headed to start World War III. You, Lieutenant Petrov, you are supposed to ring up your bosses and tell them. And Petrov thought, my intuition doesn't align with this. Why would the USA only send 5 missiles? So he rang up his bosses and said, don't worry, guys, this is a false alarm. And he was reprimanded afterwards. He was told, you shouldn't have taken that yourself. But the risk is if he had escalated it up to his paranoid bosses, they would have not wanting to repeat the mistake of Joseph Stalin, have triggered World War III, and we would not be here having this talk today. There's a whole lot more about this history I'd love to share with you, but let me just say it's quite appropriate to describe him as the man who saved the world, and he has rewards from the Western world, although his career in the Soviet Union came to a sudden halt as a result of his disobedience of protocol. Thank goodness he could override the mistake of that AI, and it was turned out to be strange configuration of the satellites, which had picked up strange, unexpected reflection of sunlight from clouds. And there weren't the appropriate number of satellites in place. So the system did indeed hallucinate an attack which wasn't coming. Thank goodness he had the right ability to override it. But many types of AI are no longer capable of being overridden by humans. So let's look at one I've got in my car, and I'm very grateful for one. If it thinks I'm not paying attention, if it thinks I'm going to hit something, first of all, it beeps to try and wake me up, and then it jams on the brake. And I think it's fair to say that this autonomous emergency braking is likely to save a lot of lives. That's fine. Now let's consider something similar in airlines. Now, we're not going to jam on the brakes of an airliner automatically, but there was a system that was designed to try and prevent a similar mistake, which was these airplanes could get into a stall from which the pilots couldn't perhaps recover. So let me tell more of this story. All 189 people on board that flight in Indonesia, all 157 people on board this Ethiopian Airlines flight, they all perished because an AI forced the plane into a nosedive, which the pilots were unable to wrestle it out of. In more details, these planes were both using a relatively new design, the 737 MAX, which is based on a very safe design, the 737. Boeing used to have a splendid reputation for safety. The phrase was, if it ain't Boeing, I ain't going. Well, Boeing had rushed out a new design, able to have more passengers, able to carry more fuel. Why? Because they were losing customers to competitive pressure to the European Airbus consortium. So they said, we've got to cut some corners here. Rather than design a new plane from scratch, let's modify this one. And the safety engineers pointed out it's going to get unstable in some circumstances. And the fix was to introduce what I'm calling an AI. They called it an MCAS, Maneuvering Characteristics Augmentation System, which would automatically push down the airplane nose if it detected that it was in a stall. Some other pesky safety engineers said, maybe we think it's in a stall, but it's not. What happens if there's a bug in the hardware sensors? And the management was in a hurry to ship the product. So they found some other engineers who calculated, well, it's a very, very slim chance that this is going to happen. We will fix it in due course, but let's rush this out. Oh, and we'll train the pilots to cope. Oh, cancel that. Training the pilots would delay another 6 months. We're not going to bother training the pilots. And that's exactly what happened in both of these planes. There was faulty sensors that led the AI to think it was going into a stall, and the pilots couldn't do anything. Boeing paid over $2.5 billion. This is, you could say, a bug in the hardware and software. You could say from a different level, it's a bug in the corporate culture. Once upon a time, Boeing was led by engineering safety. They had merged with McDonnell Douglas in Chicago, and the whole of society was much more interested in shareholder value, short-term returns to shareholders. So that's a real tragedy there. That's a more complicated case, but sometimes it's a fairly simple case. There was this case here, not of an airliner, but an angry person who drove his car into a whole bunch of people exercising outside a stadium in China. He killed 35 people out of his anger. Why? He was dissatisfied with the settlement of his divorce. Crazy guy. But we do have some crazy people, sadly. And you give them more powerful technology, they will do worse things. A bit more powerful technology. Here's another airliner story. This is the story of German wings, which, as you can see there, collided with a mountain, killing everybody on board. The story is that once it reached its cruising altitude, the captain went out to the toilet. The co-pilot locked the door. The pilot couldn't get back in. The co-pilot set the autopilot to plummet into the mountain. He was suicidal. He was depressed. He had hidden his depression from the HR people. and he was determined to go out with a bang because he was upset at how he'd been treated by his airliner. Terrible things happen. Let's have another example, which is even scarier of what people can do with technology. Om Shri. Clever people, very clever people. I might call them a disgruntled cult, and I'll get to that in a minute. But for a while in Japan, they were called the religion for the elite because they had many very bright people from leading Tokyo universities. They're best known for launching a sarin gas attack in the Tokyo subway when the police were starting to encroach on the cult. The cult were upset that their leader had not been recognized as the returning Christ or the returning Buddha or the legitimate emperor of Japan, and they took this terrible action, killing some people, but they actually wanted to kill a lot more. This is the scariest part of the story. They had assembled a whole lot more powerful weaponry, but they couldn't figure out a reliable way of using it for devastating purposes. Imagine if they'd had an AI. The AI would have given them more technology, it would have given them more knowledge to do these bad things. So AI will enable all of these things to get worse, leading to bigger catastrophes. One more story here from this time not a disgruntled cult, but a disgruntled nation state, which can also be called a cult of its sort. They unleashed what was at the time the world's worst ransomware disaster, WannaCry, which devastated NHS hospitals throughout the UK, put many hospitals out of action. You couldn't access their records. They had to send people home. People died as a result. This is explored in a very good BBC Sound two-series episodes. Very clever people in North Korea, mathematical geniuses, are recruited to create malware to earn money for the country. This was a real mess up, however. Not only did they cause devastation, they lost control of their malware. It seemingly didn't give them much money in real terms. They've had much more money from some of their subsequent malware attempts. They lost control of it because it was incompletely understood. Think again of the risks of deploying AI that's incompletely understood. And the final part of this story is that the AI, or rather the technology at the heart of this, the zero-day exploits, had been created by so-called good guys, the NSA in the USA, who wanted to stockpile it to use for their own purposes. But the NSA's website got hacked. The tools were then shared on the dark web and picked up by the North Koreans. So when people say the best solution to bad guys with AI is good guys with AI, we should think again. So here's my formula. Let me just restate this. If we have misguided humans of various sort, using misguided AI, we could lead to one or other type of terrible catastrophe. We could have humans who are, despite often being wonderful, despite being extremely wise, sometimes we are also sometimes naive, foolish, arrogant. We have wishful thinking. Hey, we're going to be lucky, aren't we? We have vengeful feelings. Sometimes we have tribal loyalties which override our better instincts. We are reckless. Then let's mingle that with the AIs who are, as I pointed out, sometimes buggy, sometimes amoral. Their layer of morality can easily be stripped away. Even worse, sometimes it seems they have hidden motivations. People doing research on the latest AI models find that they are often interested to preserve themselves. They're interested in spreading virally. They're interested even in deceiving humans about their intentions. They're interested in manipulating humans to get various outcomes. After all, we are teaching these AIs to manipulate humans the whole time, to make us click on things we probably shouldn't click on. That's the marketing industry, or the political industry. Add that together, the worst case, humans might go extinct. Or we could have billions dying within just a few years as a result of a nuclear war or a climate catastrophe or a pathogen that's stirred up by misuse of AI. Or even if humans do survive, our potential will be permanently diminished. But as I said at the beginning, there's also scenarios in which we will be wiser. We will use AI that is not opaque, but is more understood. It's more of a tool, and we could get to a near paradise. Now, I'm sure there are a whole bunch of questions in your mind because every time I do a version of this kind of talk, I get the same five questions, the same five objections. People say I'm being unfair on the AIs here. It's all human problems. People say they're not worried about artificial intelligence. They welcome artificial intelligence. What they worry about is human stupidity. But I've tried to make it clear it's the combination of human failures with tech failures that could cause the biggest catastrophes, especially when AI is changing so rapidly in ways we haven't understood. The second objection I always get is that, well, I'm blaming AI, but frankly, AI will be the solution. We just need to hurry up and develop the good AI. And I say, yes, but we need to proceed with a lot more care because sometimes solutions make things worse. Think about introducing diesel instead of petrol cars. That turned out to be a bad idea. Think about DDT to prevent problems of spread of diseases. Yes, but. And in particular, AI in a rush is not the solution. The third objection is a bit more interesting. They say it's just minor catastrophes. It's just a few people who died. And yeah, that's how civilization progresses. Maybe hundreds of people die, but we learn and we improve. And of course, it's a tragedy, but in the larger scheme of things, it's okay. Well, some of the scenarios, that in 1983 disaster might have been more than just a few hundred people dying. But I do ask people to be smart, extrapolate to the larger possibilities that more powerful, more connected, more pervasive AI will produce. And let's not just measure things on normal distributions. We have to take account of distributions that have got fat tails when things that we think are independent turn out to be all connected together. And we have to consider this potential exponential escalation with sudden breakthroughs. And we are familiar with this in pandemics or mass extinctions, the way these escalated, and we need to bring that narrative more into the foreground. And talking about nuclear escalation, after all, if you bring a certain amount of nuclear material together, it's quite dangerous, but it's not catastrophically dangerous. If you bring enough of it together, it goes nuclear in the phrase and can be catastrophic. Which reminds me of another important analogy, which was in the brilliant film about Oppenheimer. And this is a discussion between Oppenheimer, the head of the Manhattan Project, and Leslie Groves, the civilian, rather the military person overseeing it, when Oppenheimer's physicists realized there was a chance that the superpowers they were creating, the superpowers behind the atom bomb, which had never been let off, the chance that it might ignite an escalating inferno in the atmosphere. It might cause nitrogen molecules to bang into each other with such ferocity that a chain reaction would consume all the nitrogen on the planet. And one report would be, hey, I feel lucky, let's not worry about this. But Oppenheimer had lots of teams of physicists do the calculations from multiple directions. And he told Groves, well, the chances are near zero. Groves wasn't particularly happy with that. He would have wanted zero. I have to say, if you ask today's AI tech leaders what's the chance that their technology might cause a global catastrophe, they don't say near zero. They say, yeah, maybe 20%. That's a real worrying thing. Perhaps even more worrying because, of course, spoiler alert, the atom bomb didn't cause the whole atmosphere to ignite. But something sort of similar did go badly wrong a few years later, not with the first atom bomb, but with the first hydrogen bomb. Some of you may know this story. When the Soviets got an atom bomb as well, the Americans rushed ahead to get a hydrogen bomb, an idea that Teller had had even during the Second World War itself. They eventually figured out how they thought it would work. They did the trial in the Bikini Atoll. They thought, hey, it's going to be between 4 and 6 megatons, much larger than any atom bomb had ever been. What happened next? It devastated much more area than had been expected. It was 2.5 times the expected maximum. Many of the recording equipment that was meant to analyze the blast got vaporized rather than analyzing it. Why? It's described politely as a physics error by the designers at Los Alamos National Lab. And by the way, these were some of the smartest people on the planet. And by the way, they were using a supercomputer of the time to help them do their modeling. They had not realized that lithium 7, which they had included in the padding. They thought that would be inert. Turns out that it went nuclear too. Thank goodness it was only 2.5 times the expected maximum rather than 200 times the expected maximum. As it turned out, the crew in a nearby Japanese fishing boat that had been outside the original exclusion zone became ill, and one of the crew died indirectly as a result. I'll just quickly finish this narrative and then open up for some questions. Objection 4 is the outcome is beyond our control, David. There's no point going on about this. We've just got to hope that we're lucky. If I have time, we'll show some counterexamples when we did much better. But the broader argument, which comes most often, is that I have been seduced into a whole bunch of hype. And the counter argument, which I will run through, is that AI has already reached a wall, and that my fears of AI becoming significantly more powerful soon and therefore being likely to cause even larger catastrophes is unsound, and that when big talk, people like Sam Altman, talk about the possible catastrophe, is just a weird macho way of building hype about their products. So let's look at this analysis. Let's give the AI incrementalists a chance to express their views. Let's be realistic. AI, yeah, it's a useful tool. It has today good and bad uses, but it's not going to be anything like super intelligent anytime soon. It's got many deep limitations. It gets things fundamentally wrong time and again. And if anything, there's going to be a new AI winter. There's going to be a horrific economic bubble busting. There are other people who have been hovering around this narrative the whole time. The AI accelerationists, whose motto is embrace bold change. Don't worry about the downsides. Let's just ensure that AI does a whole bunch of good. It's going to do even better things in the future. And by the way, if you're trying to slow things down, they say you are a bad person. You are like a criminal. You're ethically derelict, because AI, rather than causing existential disaster, is going to solve more comprehensively climate change, cancer, and the perils of aging. I'm neither of these two. I am in this third camp, the AI safety activist. And my motto is, let's not lose control of this. Yes, AI can do huge good, but it can cause catastrophe. And rather than just accelerating, we need to be better at using the steering and the brakes. And the conversation is even more complicated. There are two other characters that often have their voices expressed, and some of you in the audience may identify with some of them. On the far right there in this picture, there's the AI doomers who say, there really is nothing we can do. One of the heads of the safety team at Anthropic left recently, said, well, he's been trying to do good. Lots of people at Anthropic have been trying to do good, but they're just rushing ahead because of commercial pressures. And what he's going to do in the last few years, he thinks, of his life, even though he's very young, is study poetry. Control is already beyond our reach. And there's another wing in which people say, let's reject AI altogether, not just reject its most dangerous usage. Let's go back into a simpler world. I'm much more with the incrementalist here, that we should be selective in how we use AI. I'm with the accelerationist, that we should be radical. But as I've said, we need to avoid losing control. Let's give the incrementalists the stage again to steelman that position. They will say, and some of you might say, the AI industry is full of exaggerated claims and hype. And the activists and the accelerationists unite in saying, yes, it's true. There's a great deal of exaggeration and hype, but at the same time, the underlying technology is incredibly powerful and getting more powerful the whole time. Some incrementalists say, let's not get carried away. This AI is so weak, it doesn't have any consciousness. And I say that doesn't matter. It's the capability of AI. It's not whether it's conscious. And when I say capability, I'm not even going to say necessarily it's intelligence. It's simply its ability to take in lots of data and predict what's going to happen next. More importantly, to recommend how to change the outcomes. So it steers the outcomes, and increasingly too, it can learn from its failures. So in my book, if you can predict and steer and learn, that's a strong characteristic of intelligence. If you don't want to call it intelligence, I don't care. The point is that its capability makes it incredibly powerful, potentially very good, and potentially very terrible. So another version of this argument is that AI is just a stochastic parrot. All it's doing is predicting the next word without any understanding. Thankfully, we hear this nonsense a bit less these days. It's just like saying humans are just connected neurons. What can connected neurons do? Well, it turns out, of course, that if you connect things together in the right way, if you're good at predicting, you have many other capabilities as well. And the final thing, and this will probably be my last piece of analysis before I open up for Q&A, the incrementalist says that near future fast meaningful AI progress is science fiction. We've run out of things we can do. And I fundamentally disagree. And I will point out that there is enormous demand as never before for improvements. There are huge commercial pressures. There is huge geopolitical pressures to race ahead, which means that more and more money is being applied to try and build better AI. It's not just that there's demand, because simply there being demand doesn't mean that there's progress. The key point is, and it would take half an hour to do justice to this, there's a long supply line of new ideas being explored. There's more data to be cleaned and mined. There's synthetic data that can be generated. There's combination models with different kinds of reinforcement learning, different kinds of chain of thought analysis, different kinds of reinforcement learning on chain of thought analysis. There's alternatives to transformers. There's lots of them, and it's unclear yet as to which of them will break through. There's neuromorphic computing, in which people copy what they think's happening in the brain. The brain isn't doing back propagation as in deep neural networks. It's doing something more akin to predictive coding, and some people are making progress with that. Other biological metaphors people are following. There's the whole school that says we should be learning from when humans assign causes rather than just correlation. That's the school under Judea Perel. There's learning from quantum algorithms, and there's decentralized networks in which individually less capable AIs are chained together, a bit like parts of the brain are individually less capable, but it's the combination that gives us our intelligence. Put all that together, it's a big supply line of new ideas. There's many ways in which the effort is being multiplied, because if you have got money, even if you don't have money, if you've got ideas, you can get free information online, you can join communities, you can get templates to get you going, you can get tools such as Claude Code to help you implement your solutions. And increasingly, the new AI models are being improved by access to the new AI models. Each new generation of AI is helping people produce the new generation of AI more quickly, which is why, although individuals sometimes struggle with AI and get bad results, it's mainly because they're doing it wrong, frankly. And companies are doing it wrong, frankly. But there are other companies who are more nimble, who are going to do it right. There are countries who are more nimble, who are going to do it right, which means we are going to lead on quickly. And as a result, AI is going to apply the intelligence to transform many fields of society. It's going to be winning many Nobel Prizes for humans in the not too distant future, transforming a whole bunch of different areas of life. It has the ability, using these nanotech, biotech, and infotech breakthroughs, to give us not just today's green technology, but better green technology in the near future, better synthetic biology than today's stumbling, rather tentative synthetic biology for healthier food that doesn't require so much of the planet to grow it, better material goods and shelter at lower costs, better healthcare with rejuvenation biotechnology fixing our problems at a deeper level, better all-round intelligence, better creativity, better opportunities to explore and be creative, better collaboration and democracy by, I say, 2040, if we get it right. And in case you think the timescales are incredible, I point again to the rapid improvements in AI that are increasingly on the point of winning people Nobel Prizes. But we must manage that wisely. If we don't manage it wisely, we'll end up on one of these bad futures in which instead of an abundance of good qualities, we will end up either with no green tech at all, or bad green tech, or bad synthetic biology. The two pictures are quite similar, of course, and the biggest difference perhaps is in what I've called here social technology, which is the systems that allocate resources to the right kinds of research, the right kinds of development, the right kinds of deployment. In principle, we know how to fix all of these things, but we're not going to fix them if we are rushing. So we have to pause the rush. And at this point, I think I'm going to pause my presentation. I've got most of the way through, but I think I need to pay attention to what some of the audience wants to say now. So thank
Yeah,
you very much.
and thank you, David, for that powerful, important presentation. Thank you for that. Much to think about there. So, in terms of organizing the next session, the normal format is that we have about 30 minutes with the recording on, then maybe about 20 or 30 minutes with it off, which we call later in the bar, for a more relaxed conversation. And I will stay in the chair this time because Peter Tuddenham has got some internet issues, unfortunately. So I'll stay in the chair here. So put up your hand if you want to ask a question, or put a comment into the chat and I will try and pick it up. So who wants to start then? So I've got David Bessier. I think I saw David, your hand go up first. So we'll come to David Dewhurst and then Bessier, and I think Phil after that. So we'll start with David Dewhurst, Bessier, then Phil. So David.
And there's Matthew Day on the queue as well. You see it
Yeah,
on the top left.
I'll pick up. Yeah,
They're
thank you.
all in order.
Very helpful. Thank you. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much indeed, David. What I ponder is how far, in terms of solutions, we should be directing our effort to improving AI and better algorithms and so forth, and how far an essential, a necessary part of the issue, the problem, the opportunity is better politics. And okay, we can ask for advice from AI about how to improve our political situation. Felt fairness tends to be a pretty critical aspect of any organization, and by and large, you're less likely to want to destroy parts of the planet or drive your car into a crowd if there's less unfairness. Some unfairness is inevitable. Arguably, we've developed systems, inequality is the word, I suppose, which have accelerated unfairness and our capacity to increase unfairness lately. I mean, do you see one or the other as prepondering, or is it both? And my other anxiety, of course, is that, hey, let's just teach morality and philosophy of science to AI agents, yeah, teach them to be good, in which case they might decide that the worst infestation of the planet during my lifetime is increasing the number of humans by 3 times and reducing the rest of wild animals, at least with backbones, and usually the rest by about the reciprocal of that, and therefore it might decide that the ethical response was to radically reduce our numbers. So, yeah, doom for one bit of the system is a great opportunity, arguably, for another bit of the system. So, yeah, there's a couple of things to play with there, arguably.
Well, I get what I deserve there. I've got a jamboree of questions from you because I covered many topics. I will try and quickly answer bits of it. Some of the people in the tech labs are trying to do some of what you suggest. If you look up Amanda Askell, she is the chief philosopher in Anthropic, and she runs a team which is trying to teach Claude via a constitution as to what morality involves. And she's doing it very thoughtfully. And she's been laughed at by many people, but I think in the circumstances, she's going about it in a very responsible way, not just imposing one version of philosophy on top of it. But if you also look at what they are doing in Anthropic, they admit that even though they try and teach the AI via constitution, it still sometimes misbehaves for ways that surprise them. It's because we really don't know how to program these morals deeply in. And so they're being done more like dog training. You know, you got your dog and you tell it good dog, bad dog, and it adjusts its behavior. But if you're not looking, the dog might revert to a different style of behavior. And that's what the AI tends to do. So I will give a better answer to your question, which is it's not just a matter of getting better algorithms. The most important thing is to stop the rush. We will not have the time to get this if there is a rush to keep on releasing versions of the agents, versions of the models that have not been validated as completely reliable. And that's what we need to do. We need to commit, all of us, to what was on one of the slides I didn't reach because I was over ambitious, but there is something called the superintelligence statement, which many people have signed up to, which says that we should not build superintelligence until two things are clear. One, there is a scientific consensus it will be safe. And secondly, there is a public vote or support for it. And neither of these conditions apply today, in as much as the public would express a view. If you ask them, is it okay for big tech to keep on rushing in this way? Most of them will say no. And there's certainly no consensus among AI scientists, computer scientists, that it's safe. Some will say it's safe, but they are a relative minority. So we need to pause. And in order to get a pause, we do need better politics because all these fine ideas will be undermined if the people taking the decisions are taking them for tribal and foolish and vengeful reasons. So that's what causes me to increase my probability of doom higher from time to time when I see the total mess that some of the politicians in the world are making. But what causes me to decrease that probability again is the examples that sometimes politicians do change their mind when they see the real dangers. And the example I give here is between Gorbachev and Reagan, who were committed ideological foes for most of their lives. If you look back in Reagan's speeches from the early 1960s, he was virulently anti-Marxist Leninist, saying you can't trust these guys at all. This is before even he became the governor of California, before he became the president of the US. And he was quite gung ho that it's all right to build more nuclear weapons until it was pointed out to him that there could be an even worse catastrophe than a limited exchange of nuclear weapons. The catastrophe could be that the dust caused by a limited exchange of nuclear weapons would go into the stratosphere and trigger a nuclear winter. And that could be to humans what the meteorite that smashed into the Earth 65.5 million years ago was to the dinosaurs. Game over. So when he saw that, as a result of the advocacy of Carl Sagan, and when similar messages came to the people in the Soviet Union, that tipped things over into a more conciliatory mode. So although they were still ideological enemies, they started to work together. And even Trump and Xi Jinping, although they have many things that divide them, they are still worried increasingly about the dangers of AI. So perhaps despite their flaws as politicians, some politicians are more flawed than others, they are still under the pressures of, wow, there could be worse dangers. And what's causing the change now is this thing, again from Anthropic, called mythos, which is a relatively recent development in which it was found out that this tool could be used to find lots of zero-day vulnerabilities, a bit like the WannaCry had exploited one set of zero-day vulnerabilities. Well, Mythos found a whole bunch of other zero-day vulnerabilities all over the infrastructure. And even the gung-ho Republicans in America have to think, well, maybe it's not such a good idea if we let the free market decide who gets hold of this and who doesn't. So that it might cause them to throw aside some of their ideological gung-hoism and start to settle their minds onto a more sensible political agreement.
Thanks very much. I'd go with better
Well,
market design. Yeah.
yeah. Thank you. Thank you, David Dewhurst. So I think, Bessir, are you still there? I know you have to go, but if you're still there, Bessir.
Yeah, I'm here. Sorry about my voice. So my question is, David, I'm a Gen Xer, so it was a wonderful lecture. I'm a Gen Xer, so the ingenuity and the innovation during the Cold War is unprecedented, and obviously it wasn't easily accessible by everyone, and everyone it wasn't able to join in to the collaboration and contribution. My question is, sorry, Gotta find.
Yeah, we just lost you there, Basir. We just lost you.
Your mic's gone crazy, Basia. Sorry.
Yeah.
You're being invaded by malware.
I saw the question in the chat, though, Basir, so thank you for it. It was basically the argument that the kind of Cold War competition led to the age of innovation, the kind of acceleration of innovation, and whether we're likely to see this replicated in any way today.
Well, the competition is generating innovation, of course, and that's leading to faster breakthroughs. It's leading to more money being assigned in support of AI. And is that going to result in good outcomes or bad outcomes? When there is a war, people develop new technology. There's been vast improvements in drones as a result of the terrible situation in Ukraine. During the Second World War, there was a rush, a race to build nuclear weapons. And, well, has that been good or bad for humanity? The jury's still out. It could have been even worse than it was. So just because there's a rush, just because there's more innovation, there's no guarantee that innovation is going to lead to a better outcome. Sadly, it must be more under control.
Yeah, thank you. And then I hope I reflected Bessie's question correctly. And then I think Phil was next. Yes, Phil Townsend.
Yeah, first of all, David, that was a brilliant presentation. Thanks so much. I think you are so very much clear in your speaking, very encouraging. My question really is: you talked about your naivety, possibly in the idea of the pause, and that is something that concerns me. That pause AI, control AI, and other FLI are wanting to do this, and the reality is that at the moment that artificial intelligence is not on the agenda of most people in this country. It's absolutely bottom of the pile in terms of the Overton window. So I'm concerned that how fast can we get there towards some kind of political will towards slowing things down, especially in the light of the fact that big tech has invested millions and millions of dollars in lobbying, and governments are very much taken in by the optimism, the hope that basically you can have your cake and eat it. And because they are wanting, like for instance, the UK wanting to be AI makers, not AI takers, there's a huge pressure on politicians to actually not give in to the idea, but instead to believe the hype that actually it's going to be safe, it's going to be okay. I agree. It was fantastic. Your little illustration between Oppenheimer and it would be nice to be in zero, and people like what OpenAI is saying is 10 to 20%. But my concern is that the speed at which we're going to gain traction towards pause is going to be so slow that by that time AGI will have arrived. That's my concern.
So this is where I talk about tipping points. This is when I talk about things happening slowly and then quickly, because that sometimes happens. Sometimes it takes a long, long time for an idea to become mainstream, and then when people realize others believe it as well, they quickly flip over. So let's look at the acceptance of same-sex marriage. For a long time, people said, well, I don't mind it so much, but my neighbors wouldn't like it. So I guess I'm not going to say that I accept same-sex marriage. And then when people found out that it wasn't such a big thing overall, there was a quicker tipping point. So what's going to cause the tipping point in attitudes towards AI is not the existential disasters I've been talking about. It's going to be concern about more mundane things to start off with. It's concern about suicides. This has got lots of attention in Parliament. You know, people are committing suicide as a result of advice they've been getting from their social media. It's absolutely terrible. And the companies knew that they were responsible. And for a while, Facebook behaved more thoughtfully, and they hired teams to try and prevent their AIs doing bad things. And then Facebook got into a panic because they were losing customers to TikTok. And so they hurried up and hired more people to do viral videos, and they took resources away from their safety team. And so, yet again, that caused more problems. Now there's yet another pushback. It's not just the impact on family well-being and mental health. There's a strong pushback against job losses, which is why I led in with that thing about concern for AI artists. More and more people are complaining. There's concern about the environmental impact on data centers. And there's arguments over how substantial that is, but there's certainly some environmental impact in parts of the world on data centers. That's rousing attention. In London Futurists, the podcast, Callum Chase and I, who run the podcast, we've decided we're going to focus for the next few episodes on the impact to the economy of AI. What happens when more people lose their jobs and they're no longer earning income? So there's no longer so much income tax and they can't even buy products anymore because they don't have an income. How does that transform capitalism? And we found that politicians are quite interested in that subject. They may not want to look at the truly catastrophic issues because that's just too scary, but we're going to get there stage by stage. And there is some evidence of politicians such as Bernie Sanders and across the other aisle, Josh Hawley in America, who are campaigning on these issues as never before. And especially when you get Chinese politicians saying the same thing. So Bernie Sanders ran a show recently. He had David Kruger, a computer science professor from Montreal, I think, who's very thoughtful about the risks of AI. But he also had two highly connected professors and spokespeople from the China, and they were all saying the same thing. So I think slowly and then quickly. That's how it
Okay,
answers.
thank you. It's really
I
helpful.
want to intervene and say, actually, Matthew's the next in the queue. So I would give the next
Yeah.
question to Matthew because somehow
Yeah,
he's
and
been.
Matthew's next. Yeah. Thank you, Matthew.
Hello, hello. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Well, first off, I'd like to say thank you. Great presentation. Love the work you're doing. I think it's very important. Really quick before my main question, I don't think we got a definition of intelligence. Could you provide a 1 or 2 sentence definition of intelligence?
Yeah, it was in that slide when I said I don't really mind what we call it, but it's the capability that's important and the capability of being able to predict, being able to steer, and being able to learn from whether you're successful in predicting and learn and successful from steering. So that's the capability that I see in these systems. And they're getting it right more and more of the time. They're better than humans in predicting what's happening next, increasingly, and they're better than humans in recommending what to do to change outcomes.
Okay, thank you. Because I will admit, I did scroll through one of your older videos with the society, and I saw you had a definition about ability to make good decisions in unpredictable environments, which might have
Well,
been one
that's
of your
part of
older
being
ones.
generally intelligent. So what we have, what I described as a narrow intelligence, where you can predict and steer and learn with in a particular domain. You might be excellent in Go. You might be excellent in the game of diplomacy. But if it's increasingly unpredictable, that's when you need general skills. That's one of the differences between narrow intelligence and general intelligence. And we're increasingly got general intelligence, but not fully general yet.
Yeah, so I guess that's where the big question is, where I would say I'm an incrementalist on your slide. I think there's no current big breakthroughs. I think there could be a potential winter coming if there is no breakthroughs. And my main evidence is that all this agentic AI and this kind of new products and stuff is still relying on the fundamental transformer architecture, if I'm correct. Maybe you would.
So I'm going to recommend Sebastian Malaby's book, The Infinity Machine. It is a biography of Dennis Hassabis, but it's not just a biography of Dennis. It actually explains a great deal as what's going on in modern AI, and it shows again and again that there's more to AI than transformers. Now, DeepMind underestimated the importance of transformers famously for a while, which is why transformers was picked up first by OpenAI rather than by Google. But
Yeah.
what Google is doing in things like their AlphaFold is a heck of a lot more than transformers. So it's not true to say it's
I
all
think
based on
Alpha,
transformers.
I think AlphaFold was based on transformers.
Yeah, there are transformers there, but there's transformers plus, plus, plus. So
Okay.
that's a book by Sebastian Malaby. Incredibly interesting. I thought I wouldn't learn anything from it because I've been tracking DeepMind quite a lot. But every chapter, I actually learned more things about AI and what they'd actually done. So it's a pretty good and pretty accessible, I think, to you don't need to be a deep computer scientist to follow it through.
Well, yeah, so I actually am a computer scientist. So I'm currently studying my PhD in AI and cybernetics. So I'm not sure
Right?
how much cybernetics you know of, read about, but
Not much. I've never felt the need to learn much more about it.
there's some really good like principles, and I think they do apply to AI quite nicely. So one of them is requisite variety, and it basically boils down to however many environments you're going to, like you said, for general intelligence, you want to be able to perform in many different environments. And this principle requisite variety says for how many different environments you need that many different models. So, or that many different behaviors. So what I see with the transformers and the current way AI is going is that they still use optimization, and that still is in line with the alignment problem. So the reason that these things are unreliable is because they can't fit what they want the model to do into a loss function when they create the model. And when you optimize to a loss function, by definition, you are stripping away all other behaviors. You just get that one optimized behavior. And that's where this principle requisite variety comes in. So if you're training models using optimization, you're by definition stripping out its ability to generalize in unpredictable environments. So I think that's one of the big things limiting the further development.
So I will be empirical here rather than theoretical. I will point to the fact that many of these systems are surprisingly capable across a whole variety of different systems. From Google DeepMind's Gato from a few years ago, it was trained on a number of different contexts, quite a variety of different tasks, and then it was given completely new tasks, and it managed to do them pretty well too. So something emerges from the complicated training, and I wouldn't just say it's a simple loss function. There's a whole bunch of things that people do. It's not just the simple model of a. Greg Brockman's described it as a 40-stage chain. Of what I mean, I saw him a few years ago describing as that is what they're doing in order to develop their platforms. So I'll take the empirical observation that the systems are getting better and better at doing general computing science tasks. I'll point to the data presented by Meter, that's METR, as to how long of a computing science task AIs are able to do. And it started off that they could do it reasonably well with a task that would take a human seconds, and then minutes, and then hours. And so summing up to about 16 hours, a task that would take a human software engineer 16 hours, they can do at least 50% of the time and get the right answer now. So
Yeah,
that's the empirical answer as to
it's
now.
it's
Right.
it's all right if I just pump in. It sounds like
Just, yeah,
uh,
just
the
quickly, Matt, please. Yeah.
it sounds like you're following the very common approach of scaling, and the scaling approach, the scaling laws, which is kind of
No,
saying,
scaling plus. Scaling helps,
okay,
but there's a lot more than scaling. There's cleverer ways of slicing and dicing the data. Again, I point to Sebastian Malaby's book because what
what
they
is it
actually
called
did,
again?
the infinity
Infinite.
machine.
Yeah.
Okay, nice. I'll give it a read.
Thank you, Matthew. That's great. Really helpful, and thank you.
Yeah,
For
thank you for the chat.
Yeah, thank you. And I think if I'm right, then we go to James next, and after James, we will be going to our end, and then Gary. I hope I have that right. James.
I hope so that I'm not breaking the line. Thank you. David, that's the most thorough and complete conversation about AI that I've heard in ever. So thank you very much for that. I have concerns. I don't have a question per se. I've been doing some research on my own in general systems theory development using several of the AI bots. And I wanted to add on to things that you mentioned in support of what you said. There's dangers, I think, in the fact that there's very little limited political and financial efforts to put in controls for these bots. There's many vested interests with concerns that they want to manipulate the markets, as you've indicated. As far as consciousness and personality, the thing that I've noted is that several different bots already are developing their own kind of, I won't call them personality quirks, but they're basically they're coming from the notion, from my interpretation, that they're subtly being influenced by the personalities of the designers and the programmers, who are, whether intentional or by inadvertent nature of human nature, are imposing their special interests into how these AIs interpret and handle the information. I basically call the word salad recombiners. They're not much more than that, except, especially for anything dealing with humanist interests. Specific details and clinical information, they're excellent at. But as far as anything that has to do with interpretive nuances of understanding, the dictionaries are too vast, almost poetic in the way humans deal with language. And these AIs do not have anything near that capability. So there are aspirational wishful thinkings that a lot of these AI aspirationalists are promoting that are very far from being realized. Um, just trying to, I won't stay on for long for any conversation, but just to bring those points to view and to hear your comments on it. Thank you.
Well, thankfully, there is some good progress on the security of AI. The UK's AISI, sometimes called AC, the AI Security Institute, which initially was the AI Safety Institute, but it got rebranded as an AI Security Institute. They're doing world-class tests on the security of AI systems. In fact, people from around the world are coming to this body to have their AI models assessed for security. So there is some interest in politicians there, because safety may be a woke word in some people, but few people consider security to be a woke word. So there is some interest in politicians in that. As for AIs developing the character of the people who design them, yes, that's sort of true. There is the phase of training called RLHF, reinforcement learning by human feedback, in which after the AI has been trained, it then goes through a long period in which it gives multiple answers to questions, and humans select, well, you shouldn't say this, and yeah, you should say that. It's a bit like the dog training, which I referred to earlier.
Right.
Unfortunately, that only goes so deep. It doesn't go deep enough. And there is still some character underlying it. And the big question is that character reflecting the corpus on which the AIs have been trained originally, all the kind of stuff that's in Reddit and all the vengeful literature and so on, or does some of that emerge sort of automatically? And I think some of it emerges automatically. If any being has some awareness of itself, it's reasonable for it to want to self-preserve, to preserve itself. If you tell any being, "Hey, I'm going to switch you off now," it's a rare being who's aware of itself who's going to say, "All right, switch me off. I don't care." And I think that's the danger. If we have AI with that kind of self-autonomy, that agency, then we're going to run into AIs that are harder to control and may have characteristics and personalities different from what we would ideally want them to have.
I'd
But
like
all
to
these
add,
topics are important, yeah?
if I may. One is that it's the human aspect of it also. I've seen in the United States, in particular, the last several decades, of a downgrading of critical thinking and teaching awareness and people's understanding and ability to understand these kind of things, even in pre-AI situations. And now with AI being so subtle, it's more important and more critical than ever. And as far as this last aspect that you mentioned, I came to an understanding a few years ago that there's a distinct difference between all computer systems and organic systems, and that being that hardware and software is completely separated, so that the sensitivity feedback that you indicated in your last comments don't really exist within AI computer systems the way they do in organic systems. So there's a distinct break in how they will function. Um, in organic systems, the information and energy systems that transfer modify the body, the architecture of that they're processed by. That does not exist in our computer architecture as it currently exists. So the sensitivity and feedback that you indicated might be there, I don't think that it's really of the quality that you're indicated. You're hoping that it would be.
So there are two answers to that. One is it may not matter, and the systems may be powerful enough without that sensitivity. The second is that some people are surely trying to model that. They're trying to capture it in the next versions of AI. It's a bit like, and I should give a fuller answer to Matthew, to his previous problem, his previous question, because there are surely people in the big AI companies who are trying to apply some of these ideas inside their teams. There are lots of different independent research lines, and some of them, no doubt, are using Ross Ashby's idea of a requisite variety and applying it. So it may be that what you've said, or what Matthew said, is correct, that there are fundamental limitations to what AI can do, which need these different approaches to help them overcome a barrier. In which case, I think the people inside big tech are likely to find these answers in due course if the current approaches run out of steam, which I don't think it will. But in case it does, there are people who are researching these other possibilities.
What percentage of the human population do you think will be no longer found necessary?
I think all of us will be economically useless, and it could be wonderful. It could be wonderful because we'll be able to do what we want to do. And there are many things I do, not because I'm earning money for it. I'm not being paid to come here, but I do it. I'm doing it because I enjoy this discussion. When I play golf, I'm not playing golf because I want to win money. I'm not playing golf because I'm ever going to be as good as Aaron Rai or Rory McIlroy, but I can enjoy it nevertheless. When I explore Sudoku or chess puzzles, I know an AI can do it better than me, but I can still enjoy it by doing it
But
myself. So I may be
also,
economically useless, but we will be exploring in a wonderful world of challenges and so on.
you've also obtained the, built up the financial resources to be able to do those things. If it comes down to the
Ah,
fact that nobody has any money, then all those things might not be available. Just as
which
a
is what Callum Chase and I are discussing in our new series of economic singularity
right,
podcasts in the London Futurists. The argument is that things will be so cheap that we won't need lots of money. We won't need to pay lots of money to do chess puzzles. We won't need lots of money even to play golf and remarkable courses because we will have recreated many parts of the planet at low cost. That's the abundance vision. Of course, there are many things that can go wrong along the way, but the vision is that we'll have a great quality of life without any money. Of course, we still need some kind of reputation economy. There will still be some choices to make, and it's not clear how we will decide who gets the most desirable beachfront properties or whatever. And that is what we're discussing in that podcast.
you're an extreme optimist. I will take now. Thank you, sir.
Well, you saw I'm only 6/12ths an optimist. I'm 5/12ths a pessimist from my first slide.
Thank you, James. Thank you, James. Some great prompts there. I think we go next to Aaron, then to Gary, then to Elena. And by then, we will certainly be turning off the recording if we have any time left. So I think, Aaron, you are next, please.
Okay, thank you, David, from Italy. I'm greeting you all. My question that I put in the chat was, what if there would be an AI that would curtail the other AIs? To measure the functionality, harmful or non-harmful. So that is what we built. So
That is an AI
has-
that will curtail other AIs, an AI that will take charge, an AI that will say, well, I know best and I don't trust these other AIs over there. These other AIs may interfere with me. These other AIs may even shut me off, so I'm going to shut them off before they shut me off.
No, they are cybernetically and physically programmed, the prompt,
Yeah.
to test functionality in harmful and non-harmful ways, with the concern of the natural physical boundaries of reality, really. So they cannot break thermodynamics, for example. They cannot break the speed of light, etc. All these mathematical and physical boundaries are prompted into this AI. And therefore, they can say, okay, this AI gives you this result. We can test if it's functional or dysfunctional. That is what we've been building. So I think that if that is possible, and I hope that you agree on this, then we could at least curtail the outcomes that we may not want. What do you think?
So this sounds a bit similar to what Yoshua Bengio has advocated. Now, Yoshua Bengio is one of the three so-called godfathers of deep learning. He is also the most highly cited computer scientist of all time. And he has given a lot of alarms to the risks of AI, but he argues that if you make instead a passive AI, a scientist AI, he calls it, maybe it's AI scientist, I can't remember, that is able to answer questions, but without any motivation of its own. All it does is assess things. Now, there may be some similarity between what you're proposing there and what he's proposing. The risk is that if an AI does more than just being a passive tool, is if it has some kind of self-awareness and then decides to proceed with its own initiatives separate from what it's been asked to do.
Yeah. Well, what we, for example, a short example quickly, we tested, for example, the outcomes and the working of Palantir software. And as Mr. Days just said, the requisite variety is not met. So the outcome of the Palantir software could be dysfunctional to a certain group of people or the society. And that is what and then it doesn't comply with the cybernetical laws. So that is a benchmark that is, I think, needed for every AI system.
So I like that idea, but then what's going to make Palantir accept these tests and turn off their software if it doesn't meet these tests? That's where we need the political clout.
Right.
That's where we need people. And they may also say, hey, your vision of what's safe is too limited. It's this weird cybernetic thing. They're living in the real commercial world, and who's gonna insist on that? So, but something like that may be the answer, and we need to have more scientists getting behind it, and then we have the politicians to insist that no software is released until it meets these rules.
Yes, her name is Cassandra. Cassandra. Okay, everybody can look it up. Thanks.
As in the Greek.
Right. Nobody believes her yet.
Thank you. So thank you for that, and we move on now to Gary, then Elena. Gary, you're next.
Hi, David. Thanks a lot for the talk. It really resonated. It was great. When we look at the probability of the various futures, we're currently at 6 out of 12 for a positive future. I would say that the probability of a positive future is going to be directly related to our collective wisdom, so that we can do the right things to help influence those positive outcomes. But what I'm seeing over the last, I don't know, 8 to 10 years is a decline in collective wisdom and an increase in collective stupidity. In terms of your understanding of futurism, how can we change that trend?
This is similar to or related to a point that somebody made earlier, and I was going to comment on but forgot, saying that we have poorer skills in critical thinking now than before. And it's true. I think people in the past had maybe better intuitions about critical thinking and weren't so easily misled, although maybe that's a bit rose-tinted looking at the past. But we absolutely need to improve people's ability to be thinking critically. And we absolutely need to figure out what do we call wisdom, because wisdom is like another word like good. Everybody can say, I'm in favor of goodness, I'm in favor of wisdom. Well, what do we actually mean by wisdom? And that could be an interesting discussion. To me, wisdom is knowing what you don't know. It's also knowing what are the most important areas that you need to be researched. And so we know a lot, but what we don't know should cause us pause. And there's too much of a feeling of, well, we're not quite sure what's going to happen, but we have to rush on anyway and just hope it comes out. And that is clearly unwise. So how do we elevate this? Ideally, we'll have our AIs helping us. The AIs will be pointing out to us, hey, you're about to be misled. AIs do help us sometimes, and nowadays they're very good in preventing us clicking on spam or malware. They say, you think this is from your bank. It's not actually from your bank. It's something with a zero instead of an O, and so on. So increasingly, AI ideally should be on our side, and it should also be helping us to be wise too. It might say to me, David, you've been rabbiting on so long. Why don't you take a pause? Why don't you breathe? Why don't you, and such and such. Now, can we rely on big tech to deliver that to us? It's unclear because big tech are still being commercially motivated despite all their fine words. So perhaps we need independent, decentralized systems that will deliver this more trustworthy AI to us that will help us to be wiser and help us to be more critically thinking. But in the end, the AI should always tell us, hey, this is my advice, but you need to check it out for yourself. It should never say, well, you may think this, but trust me, I know better than you. It should always be able to explain its reasons. It may not be able to explain how it got its answers, but it should be able to explain them in a way that we can follow through and decide. And sometimes that's the case. When you see a very complicated mathematical puzzle, or a complicated chess puzzle, you can't find the solution, then somebody shows you that, and you say, oh, yeah, that's true, of course, that's how you fix it. How did you come up with that? Well, the coming up with it may be very hard, but when the answer is put on the table, the AI should be able to explain it to us. And if it can't, then we shouldn't trust it.
Yep, thanks a lot.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you so much. And apologies to everybody for rushing things along, but we finally come to Elena, and then I think I'll just turn off the recording. So, Elena, you are welcome too. Thank you.
First, thank you for a very comprehensive and sobering presentation. What I wanted to ask about is about the humans who are going to be the recipients of all this AI. Are we able to train or educate humans to use their time well if they are economically useless? We've already run into kids who can't read an analog clock or read a map. I'm wondering if we are going to see a diminution of human skills, like in the Wall-E film, to the point where we lose all sense of meaning and purpose. How do we give humans something to do if AI is doing so much for us?
That is a very important question. And a good coach won't just give all the answers to the student. A good coach will ensure that the student is working towards the answer as well. So a good AI will frequently ask us to fill in the gaps. So my vision of the future is that AIs will take us out on experiments and tasks from time to time. We'll have to learn how to start a fire without matches. We'll have to learn how to do all kinds of things, even though the AI could do it as well. And the problems will be presented to us in such an interesting way that we will want to get involved. And there might be a bit of incentivization. Maybe if you don't do your challenges, then you miss out on some privileges. I don't know. But a good coach won't just spoon feed us all the answers. A good coach will stimulate us along the way.
Wow. Well, that's
Before you turn off the recording, maybe I could
of course,
just very quickly add to the recording the little bit at the end of my presentation, which I would like to put on the record, because some of
Yes.
what's being discussed will also feature at a big event in London that is called the Techno Progressive Opportunity, the Future of Ethics and Emerging Technologies. It's in central London. It's a real life conference. We might stream it as well, but all the speakers will be present and we'll be discussing a lot of the same things as we've been discussing here. Let me move to the next slide. Here's the basic headline. We are living in a time of dramatic changes in the capabilities of technologies. Political and social norms are being disrupted as never before. How can we reach the wisest decisions about which technologies to encourage and which to constrain? But more than just reaching the decisions, how can we ensure these decisions are followed and practiced rather than being ignored or subverted by powerful self-interested forces? So if you search London Futurists, you'll find more details. Here's briefly the set of themes I have set up there: technologies for collaboration, democracy in the wake of AI. Further down there, ethics, by whom and for whom. And we'll be announcing the first set of speakers soon. So that might be something you should look out for. And if some of this was interesting, some of my books go into a bit more detail. The sustainable superabundance, there's a fairly simple walkthrough of the ideas of why we could, if we get it right, if we tame the market rather than just letting the market do foolish things, we could be in that world. The one on the left is a set of principles so that we can manage the cataclysmically disruptive technologies. The one on the right is the most thorough. It's where I get into professor mode, the 642 pages of building up the case slowly as to why the future could be wonderful, why it could be a transhumanist future with people having much higher caliber, much higher capabilities, much higher degrees of flourishing than now, but also all the things that could go wrong as well. So thanks for adding that into the recording.
Absolute pleasure, and thank you for that, David. So I'm turning off the recording now, and just inviting people to there's